Hello. Oh no, my microphone. It was not cooperating. Hey, this is Chris, Phoenix Gaming. Big shout out to everybody. Today's going to be a pretty cool one. We're going to recap my game with, his name was Kieran. I'm just doing a sound check. But we're going to recap that. Space Wolf player says I'm offline. This is why we do sound checks. Make sure everything's working right. Oh my goodness. Are we working? We've got some really bad storms going here. There we go. And it is wreaking havoc on literally everything. But it's been nuts. So, got to play round two in the league. I want to touch on a few things about round one before I jump into round two. As I played round two and I kind of thought about what happened round one with GSC, it's clear to me that my list is missing a couple things. It's a very fragile list, but it's very surgical. And that works very well into certain armies, right? Like armies that don't have infinite bodies. And really, what ended up happening was because it was so fragile, I couldn't tank his shooting. So I think, honestly, had I had maybe a few more Talos or some Chronos or something bigger and chunkier on the table, there's a good chance I probably control those primaries that I was struggling with. And I just wanted to touch on that, just to let everybody know I do think about my games a lot more than I probably should, and how I could have improved and what I could have done differently. So it's one of those where that's kind of where I came to that decision with it. I was like, okay, and I knew they weren't impossible to beat. Like they are very tough to play against. But if I just don't have the tools for holding objectives, that's going to be the biggest issue. So if I knew I was going to go against a bunch of GSC, I would probably bring a little bit more of the Rax and the Homunculus and stuff like that, and then just try to hold those objectives with the Talos, the Chronos, things of that nature. So just some afterthoughts on that one. Last night I got to play round two against Space Wolves. Let me pull up our mission real quick. We'll talk about that. Oh no. I have an email from my Games Workshop boss. I am not reading it yet. Sorry. Battles. A lot of this data is just on my phone. So, games. What did we do last night? Not that one. Kieran. That was his name. Super nice kid. Had a fun time playing with him. Very, very nice human being. So we had priority targets, hidden supplies, search and destroy. Priority targets is you gain 5 points for each objective you control in your command phase, and then you gain 5 points you control for 5 points for each objective you control at the end of the game. But there's a cap of 10 in your turn. So I can hold 3 objectives, I can only score 10 points. And then at the end of the game, I can score up to 15 by controlling 3 objectives. And that one, it doesn't matter who goes first or second. Like, they just score the way they score. I did end up going first this game, which has really been a struggle for me so far. Is like, okay, how do I kind of mitigate this struggle I've had going first? And I did very well this game. We'll kind of talk about it. Search and destroy is the 9-inch quarters bubble deployment zone, and then hidden objectives is, or hidden, whatever it is, hidden supplies is the bonus objective. So we did player placed terrain, as I said before, and okay, I was just watching my ad timer on Twitch. Oh, before I dig into that, because I'm a silly goose, do I still have it? I do. How awesome. If you use Army Speed Painters and you're going to buy a box of them, I recommend using my link because you're awesome and I'm awesome and we like each other. It won't cost you any extra money. It does give me a kickback. If you don't, that's cool too. But the option is there for you. It's in the chat. And in the chat on YouTube. and it is just an Amazon affiliate link. And there's an incoming ad in a minute. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, as I was saying, Space Wolves, Drezar, my brain, man. My doctor's appointment is today to start getting this stuff like looked at and taken care of. So, we use player place terrain. Man, that's a big mess. And I apologize for the ugly terrain. A lot of my nicer terrain is packed because of the tournament that I'm running tomorrow. And actually, I think I'm going to be handing the keys over to somebody else so they can try organizing it, but we'll see. But what we're doing here, let me flip over to full screen. Boop. And boop. All right. Wow. And everybody's favorite. So it's basically, I think like right here. Man, that's really showing up pretty well on this. Boop. And I think it's like here. Okay, so that's effectively our deployment zones. It's not perfect. I think the bubble actually comes more like this. But you get the idea. So that was our deployment zone. We had our bonus objectives. So you get rid of the one in the middle. And it went here. And it went here. And I just took a picture of the table so everybody could see. Like I said, I do apologize. Basically, everything with a footprint is ruins. Everything that's ruins is first floor blocking. And really, it has to be right now. With the way shooting is in the game, if you want to play in any other phase, which is, there's only one other now. But if you want to play in the fight phase, you have to have first floor blocking. And not every feature necessarily needs to be, but you need to have it on the table so that you can stage without just picking up fistfuls of models. As you can see, I had some really nice looking Space Wolves. My models are painted. They might not look like it, but again, I'm not an artist. That's just where we're at. So, I did go first, and so almost everything I said in my planning came true. And it's funny because I was talking, he's got a buddy that is in the league, and he and I were talking, and I've known him for a bit now, his buddy. And we were talking, and I was like, do not tell me anything, but this is exactly what I think is going to happen. So when I said it to him, he was just like, yeah, I won't say anything to you about it. We'll see, because he wanted to watch the game. And I had said, hey, man, like, he's going to come plant stuff right here in the middle of the board. Did he go first or did I? I went first. That's right. I had to double check that. We both chose tactical missions. And then, boop, 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 boop. What did we discard? So turn one, I drew Overwhelming Force and Assassination. And that was basically just destroy an enemy unit on an objective. Big shock, I didn't score any tactical points turn one. Because I went first. And actually, I think what you're seeing, it is. I think you're actually seeing after my turn one. Because this is probably more what our deployment zone should look like. With a little bubble here. So I got a Venom down here. My Raider is somewhere in this vicinity also. This might actually be my Raider that's here. I don't have the whole table. I tried to get it, but... so I did. I bounced my Raider up. I bounced my Talos up. Knowing that his Ballistus, which is right here, is going to have very limited shooting. And then... that was it. Like, I didn't really move a lot. And that was okay. I wasn't sure how things were going to go. I've got just a ton of Cabalites in here. He did put his 2 units of Inceptors in Deep Strike. Everything else went in the table. His turn 1, let's clear out all this markings. His turn 1, he basically took this and flew it around to here. This guy moved up. And then his Terminators came out. And then he had Intercessors and Intercessors, right? And then his turn 1, he drew something equally shitty, thankfully. He had no prisoners, which he did score. But I'm trying to remember what he even killed. No, he didn't score no prisoners this turn. He had no prisoners and behind enemy lines. So again, neither one of us scored anything. He did shoot this into my Talos, and then he was able to draw a line here because of that, and he could see them. I -1 to wounded them. The Storm Speeder gave him +1 to wound, and I'm glad I did, because he only put like 3 damage on the Talos just because of the Feel No Pains and everything. His Oaths got slapped on them, but the -1 to wound was super relevant. And really, he had this guy here. So I had a Venom that flew up right here. I dumped them out on the objective. And you can't tell, but I am within 3 here. I'm just barely within 3. I dumped them out. I did shoot at a Dreadnought here with my squad. And then in the fight phase, I could hop them back in. And then I was outside a line of sight, so he couldn't come shoot me. So it was a little big brain play for me. Haha, look at me. I'm a genius. Not really. I just kind of happened to see it as I was moving, and I was like, oh shit, I should do that. So that was our turns 1. Very, very basic, simple. Now he had his Storm Speeder here, and then he had a unit of Intercessors here. Both were within 3 of this objective. And that becomes relevant because turn 2, I drew Storm Hostile Objective, and I retained Overwhelming Force. I did discard Assassinate. I was just like, whatever. So Lilith and company came up here. I had, because this dude moved up, I had Venoms coming up. So I used the Venom to move block, and I just shot at the Dreadnought again. I think it had like 1 wound by the time it got into combat with me. And that's his melee dude. I forget what they're called. Maybe that's the Ballistus. I don't know. Whatever the fighty one is, that's a Redemptor. And then this is the shooty one. Again, they're all just like Redemptors to me. I don't know. I did have my Scourges drop in here, because I thought I should be able to take care of him. I whiffed. It's okay. Like my second shooting phase and third shooting phase were very marginal. But turn 3 is when I really started, like, turn 3 and 4 is when I did the most work, though. Because he continued to move that Dreadnought up. This is a little Wolfen Dreadnought. He moved that handsome boy up. And, man, but that was after. So I put Lilith up there. She cleared everything out. I killed the Speeder. My Talos came over. They actually didn't do well into the Speeder. I only needed to get, and I didn't even put them there. I just put them here in this feature. I got 1 liquefier in range, and I literally knocked it down to like 1 wound. I needed 2 of my Haywires to go through, and only 1 of them did. So if I'd have had 2 of them go through, donezo. But it didn't work that way. So I had to commit more shooting to it than I had wanted to. But ultimately, I cleared both of those units out. And then what ended up happening is I ended up scoring Storm Hostile Objectives and max on Overwhelming Force. And then I knocked him off of the only objective he controlled besides the one in his deployment zone. So then he scored 5 for his primaries. And then on his turn, he retained no prisoners, which he did end up capping, because he killed the witches and he killed Lilith. But Lilith's 4-up invuln tanked so much more than it should have. So rather than just charge Lilith with a Dreadnought, he opted to try to kill her in shooting, which was, I think, one of the bigger mistakes he made that game. He didn't have a ton of good targets, but man, like, she can't stand up to a Dreadnought, right? Like, she might not die because of the 4-up invuln, but she's not going to kill it. And then, let's see, we got no prisoners, and then he had secure no man's land, which was pretty easy for him to score, because he controlled 2 in no man's land at the end of his turn. Because he ended up controlling this one, and then he ended up controlling this one, because he had Thunderwolf Cavalry kind of come out here, and then they made a charge into my Talos, and big shock, they died, right? Like, I was not upset by that at all. What was funny was before the game, I was like, look, man, I have two melee-centric characters. I've got old Big Bad Drazar. I'm going to try and refrain from calling him what we call him on stream. I had Big D. We'll just call him Big D. Big D and the boys. And I told them what they did. And I was like, they're silly. If they touch something and if they touch something and I'm wounding it on 4s, it's gonna go away. Just through weight of dice and then rerolls with the pain tokens and stuff like that. And he was just like, yeah, okay, man, that's cool. And I'm like, and they're 2 damage. So they're gonna mulch Terminators. They're gonna mulch whatever they touch. And he was like, okay, man. And then I was like, and then Lilith is going to vaporize anything she touches with the infantry keyword. I am telling you now. And he was like, yeah, all right, man. And then when she charged that squad of intercessors and then they were all dead before I even resolved the rest of the attacks, he was just like, oh. And then when I had Drazar in this Raider back here, the Ravagers over here. They came up here and then charged out of the wall at the Thunderwolf cavalry. And then I had Hellions start moving this way because he dropped. It was interesting. He dropped his Inceptors. And that I think he misplayed his Inceptors pretty hard. But he dropped them. And he dropped them here. And then he shot at my Scourges. Because he was like, oh, those are dumb. Those have to go. And there was a fair statement. Like, I don't know that that was the wrong play. But the problem was that he was so worried about me spending CP to overwatch him. Because he knows that it's not likely to hit. But if it does, he's just picking up Inceptors. That he actually dropped them like way back here. So my Hellions just came, and they both came up, and they cleaned them out. And then, like I said, Drazar charged into here. And man, I used his once per game ability. Drazar smoked the Thunderwolf cavalry captain. And then the rest of the squad of Incubi just cleaned up that Thunderwolf cav. And he was just like, oh no. And then his Terminators were kind of stuck out here. After, like, they were bottlenecked. Let's clean this up. So he had bottlenecked a lot of his Terminators. And I should have taken more pictures in between rounds. And I will do a better job of doing that for everybody. So that you get a better visual of how things move. I wasn't the best at that. Once I start playing, man, the ADD kicks in and I am just like hyper-focused and I can't peel away from it. So I will do a better job. I'll set reminders, do a better job to take pictures. But the Terminators end up getting bottlenecked because of Dreadnoughts. Like, he had this guy up here, and then the Thunderwolf cavalry came in and they just couldn't get forward. And then by the time, see, that was turn 2. And yeah, I got in turn 2, we already talked about it. So turn 3, I had extend battle lines and area denial. And every turn I scored 10 on my primaries, which was good. Like, that was very good for me. So I controlled an objective in No Man's Land and my DZ. Because I basically sat on this one almost the whole game. I tied up a Dreadnought with the Archon. And I tanked like 2 shooting phases and 2 fight phases. And I think that's the first time the Archon hasn't just instantly died the first time somebody's targeted him. So that was kind of funny. And then area denial, I ended up capping because he just couldn't get wholly within 6 of the center. And I just ran a unit of Cabalites up here. So like I said, what ended up happening then was his turn. He ended up drawing overwhelming force, which he did score. And then he drew cleanse, which he wasn't keen on. At that point, he didn't have the disposable units because my splinter cannons were shredding his infantry. Like, he had intercessors, and basically every time my Venoms shot at the intercessors, he was picking up almost entire squads. And part of that's because my dice were pretty good. His saves weren't the best. Like, and that's the way the game goes sometimes. But also, I was just fishing for 6s. Like, I would power them up. I would fish for 6s. So, like, the 4 that hit on 4s, or the 6 shots that would hit on 4s, I might get 3 6s because I was just re-rolling. So now I've got 6 hits because the splinter cannons have sustained hits. So it's one of those where I was doing everything I can to try to maximize the damage I put on them. So at the end of the day, it probably averaged out. But going back to that, so his Terminators ended up like stuck out here because he wasn't sure. He kind of thought he wanted to commit this way because I had my Venom and my boys. The Venom died to the Dreadnought, but then the Dreadnought died. So I just had Kabalites sitting here. And he was just like on the fence between charging here or charging my Incubi that were down here. And it was like an 11-inch charge, and, he didn't make it. And that's the way it is sometimes. But then my next turn, I was able to Turn 4, I ended up drawing Defense Stronghold, which I got. And turn 5, I got Cleanse. I had Hellions move up here. They did Cleanse because I controlled the objective. My squad of... I had another squad of Kabalites, a 5-manner, come up here, tag the objective. And then I had... because they were out of the Venom. And then one of them did Cleanse. It just moved up and did Cleanse. So I took the objective, moved up and did Cleanse. This squad advanced around because at this point his deployment zone was pretty empty. And he had this one just through sticky objectives. And then I was really on the fence, and I don't remember why I decided against it. But part of me was ready to spend that 2 command points to just come back here and tank the objective. But something had me stop, and I don't remember. It was something on the table. Oh, his Terminators hit on 4s. So it was one of those where if they didn't die or if he wanted to interrupt somewhere, like I wanted to make sure I had LFR because I only had 2 command points at that point. So I was like, all right, I don't want to spend them all. I'd rather just get there, next turn, shut off his scoring, because it do be like that, right? So we'll get there turn 5 was kind of where I was at with it. So then, Drazar and company came up here, and man, wouldn't you know it, they shred Terminators too. He did use Armor of Contempt, but like I just put so many wounds on him, and each one was 2 damage, and it was only a 5-man. It wasn't like 10 of them. And they had 4 wounds, but that didn't matter, right? Going from 3 to 4 wounds doesn't necessarily matter against 2 damage attacks. And then Drazar, the one thing that I will say is that with Drazar, what helped him was that every time he fought, I rolled at least 1/6 because he has dev wounds on his big chops. So again, was some luck involved. But being able to just be like, cool, now you can pick up 3 or 2 Terminators guaranteed, but you still have to make all these saves, was just like, yeah, that's cool. I like it. So it was very, very good. Unfortunately for him, it was his first time playing against Drukhari, so he wasn't 100% sure what to expect. And like I've said before, that's kind of the interaction I've had with it. And let's clear all these out. His turn 5 was pretty meh, but that's because at that point he only had, I think, 2 units on the table. Overall, it was 92 me, 52 him. I scored 45 out of 50 on my primaries and 37 out of 40 on my secondaries. And then he had 25 out of 50 and then 17 out of 40. And so the big takeaways are, I followed my own advice because I'm very guilty of not doing it, right? I've told you guys before that I do also play orcs. So we're going to do yellow because that really stands out here, does it? Maybe the pink is better. Let's do, yeah, the pink's better. So a lot of times I will spread myself out. And then I just like fall apart a lot faster. And it's a tendency that I have to be mindful of. And I've said it 1,000 times on this channel. Play half the table, play half the table, play half the table. And guess what I did this game? I played half the table. So basically, right? Based on his deployment and the way he committed, And the fact that I was able to peel this turn 2, getting rid of that speeder took a lot of pressure off my army. Because if he hits something with the speeder, the rest of his army adds 1 to wound rolls against it. You couple that with Oaths of Moment, and that's like a recipe for disaster for me. Because his bolt guns will start wounding things on 4s and 5s for vehicles. And I can't have that. Like, they already basically take damage if a bolt gun punches through. I cannot have him +1 to wound against it. So when he tanked it right in the middle of the board, I was just like, yes, pick it up. And like I said, that was the thing he did, man. So much of his army just gravitated to the middle of the board because he's a Marine player, and that's what they do. And I don't know why it is a tendency that they have, but it's like there's some sort of weird magnet that just draws them in. And they're just like, middle of the board, let's go! And so when he did that, I was like, okay, cool. And then he put his slower units here, like his Terminators started crawling that way. So that allowed me to camp up here and just blast. And then, like, my Talos died pretty early, but they baited some of his faster units out. And baiting those faster units out allowed me to cripple his mobility. Because by turn 3, his fastest unit was 6 inches. Because I either tied up the Inceptors or I had killed the Inceptors. You know, so as I'm just denying his speed, that's what really helped me win the game, was just like, okay, that moves fast, it's gotta go. That moves fast, it's gotta go. And then this gives him +1 to wound, it's gotta go. So it was a very good, like, my game plan worked. I put it into action, and everything kind of went the way it could have or should have. So now, as a Marine player in the middle of the north of the best, I don't know what the last word is there, JD. If you could let me know what that last couple lanes for shooting. There we go. Yeah, I understand that. But as a not Marine player, it's really beneficial for me knowing that 99 games out of 100, if I play a Marine player, they're just going to go sit at the middle of the board. That really allows me to just work my plan, right? Because my plan is to never go to the middle of the board. I am going to give it to you, and I'm going to dance around you as best I can. And that's exactly what happened here. I had my Venom that was down here, never moved past like this point. My Ravager came out here, and then I did Fire and Fade it back. So it like came out, put a ton of damage on something, and then Fire and Faded back down. And then once he saw that, he was just like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? There's so much motion. And that's kind of how I play Drukhari, and that goes into what I was talking about at the beginning. And you know, like, why my list is probably going to be a little bit harder into things like GSC than other Drukhari lists is because mine tends to be a little bit more surgical with a little bit more motion and a little bit less tankiness on objectives. So it's more predicated on just making sure I can hit the units I need to hit. And that's just a style of play, is what it is. It's one of those where I now see it and at least now have a better game plan if I have to go into GSC again. And I will, I'm sure, end up playing them again at some point. And I will know how to interact with them and kind of adjust with them. So, that being said, like I said, game plan worked. I basically took this half of the board and was like, this is mine. You don't get to be over here. And it worked. Like, he kept funneling units in, and I kept being able to pick them off. And fortunately, like, Drukhari do score tactical well enough that ultimately, like, it was a good interaction, right? And I went into this knowing that I had the advantage on mobility. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to play tactical because I have the mobility advantage. I'll be able to avoid him. I'll be able to duck him. I don't have to worry as much about getting spread out real thin. So, again, after my game with GSC, I still kind of stand by playing fixed into GSC, or at least in that exact situation, because the missions are so varied right now that it's hard to say this will work every game. But for the mission and stuff that we had, I stand by it simply because I almost capped my secondaries there. The only thing was I just couldn't hold primaries, and that's a thing I'm still kind of adjusting to, is just the way the army interacts is a bit different, and I'm still seeing some of these armies for the first time. I do play a lot of 40k, but I don't get to see as big of a variety of armies as I would like to. I do get the occasional game against Necrons. I get a lot of games against Nids. I have the potential for some occasional games against Grey Knights. I get some Tau, you know. So it's like the local players, it's a little bit limited on what I get to play against, which is true for everybody. But we actually, for a local meta or community, have probably one of the most varied communities. Like it's probably one of the biggest varieties in terms of local communities that I've seen, which is pretty cool. And I do some TTS occasionally, but it is not my favorite way to play. Overall, like I said, everything kind of went according to plan. I was able to set the table, and as you can see, the terrain isn't symmetrical, but there are shooting lanes, right? We've got a lane here. Let's clear some of this out. We've got this. We've got like here. We've got here. We've got here. We've got here. So there are some fairly decent shooting lanes, but there's also a lot of good cover. And what that did was, like, it made your positioning very important. It made your overall how do you want to do it very important. Like your approach to the game was a lot more important. And honestly, as we continue to work on our player place terrain system, I think this is something I might lean into a little bit more in the future as I start to build up my terrain collection again, and as I start to rebuild my footprints and everything. Once I can kind of standardize my player place terrain tables, I think that is a format that I am going to be looking at doing a little bit more often, simply because I do it a little bit differently than other places that do it. I have you set the table and then roll for attacker defender, whereas a lot of places that do it the opposite. They have you roll for attacker defender and then you set the table. So it doing it the way I do it promotes players to do at least like some sort of balance rather than 50-50 gamble on getting the deployment zone they want. But then it also keeps the tables a bit more asymmetrical. Like this one isn't perfectly asymmetrical, but it's not symmetrical. And honestly, it was a good table. It was very balanced. We had fun on it. And the only thing I think I need to change is I might need to drop one of these for each player, because it does get a little dense. But I'm going to do a few more games with it, because this was the first game where we really struggled to fit things. And I think a lot of it just had to do with how everything got placed. So, but yeah, that's it. Sorry if this was a little bit rambly today. I had a whole list of things that I wanted to go through, and I went through them. But again, I am heading to the doctor today. We are going to start working on getting the brain fixed. And, that's what I would tell everybody that's out there, man. If you're not feeling well or you're not feeling right, take care of yourself. Not just on a physical or mental aspect. Take care of both. Like, get out and walk a dog, do whatever. You don't have to be an athlete, but just keep moving, stay mobile, and, make sure you're taking care of your brain as much as you are your body, because, man, as I get older, it becomes so much more apparent how important that is. And I wish I would have taken better care of my brain and my mental health at a younger age and started learning more about this stuff and getting it diagnosed and taken care of before I turned 40. So that's going to be it. Again, I do apologize for the kind of frenetic pace and kind of shotgun blast approach to it. Like I said, I did have a plan. And I promise I will take more pictures in between rounds so you can see the state of the game as it moves on. Like I said, once I once I start doing one thing, it's really hard for me to remember to do anything else. I have to set reminders, and even then, there's times where I'm just like, nope. So, I do appreciate everybody hanging out with me for the little bit that we did this. This wasn't going to be an excessively long one. I'm going to try and get you out of here before the ad starts in 30 seconds. So you guys have a great day. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you later.